My biggest blunder.
The biggest blunder I've done in business.
My definite biggest blunder.
Well, depending on how you look at it, it's probably from all the wisdom.
Yeah, I'm a girl from a little village up north of Botswana called Musojani. It's actually a Kalanga area. My dad is full on Kalanga, but my mom is half Kalanga, half Zulu. Yeah, so growing up, writing was not something that I actually thought about or thought about pursuing. I only discovered that I enjoyed writing when I was at boarding school in Maung, which is also north of Botswana, but on the western side of Botswana. So I used to write short stories and short poems. But then when I went to university, which was in Malaysia for 4 years, I was pursuing a degree in mass communications. My major was journalism. And I remember when I went for the orientation, like after you finish high school, you go for like an orientation where in these universities then kind of pitch and say, oh, come to us, or come to us. But then there was one at Limcook Wing. There was, where they showcased whatever it was that they wanted us to see. And the lady asked me what I enjoyed doing. And I said I enjoyed writing. And that's how I actually pursued this degree in mass communications and actually majoring in journalism. But when I was at university, I realized I actually don't like writing news or writing hardcore news. What I enjoyed doing was writing, fiction, like stories. So yeah, that is how it all started. But after university, I actually started blogging. And then my poems were kind of like darkish because, as a teen, you go through stuff, and then the only outlet that you actually have is either drinking, some smoke, some take drugs. I delved into writing, and was my outlet. So writing novels was also something that I never thought about. I just thought, you know what, let me just write my poems and just blog, and that was it. It was actually a process. I published my first book, which is The Shrink, this one, in 2018. The idea actually came to me when I was a temp. After finishing university in 2010, I then took like a sabbatical and I went on holiday in England for like 8 months or something ridiculous like that. And then when I came back, that's when, reality hits. You're supposed to start working, make money, and all that stuff. So I was a temp in 2011, and I was working for this organization, NACA, and they were actually doing the counseling kids that would come to the clinics, not kids per se, but like adolescents that were going through, either abuse or, in relationships or parents or whatever kind of abuse that they were going through. So when one came to the clinic and the doctors noticed something, they would then send them to this counseling, facility where I was, and I was just transcribing. So my job was just to sit quietly and just, take notes. So then I realized that these youngsters were actually not opening up to the counselors, and they were finding it very hard. They would just give like tidbits of information, which made it quite difficult for the counselor to actually do their job. And around that time, there was a popular comic called Super Strikers that was circulating around Botswana for free. And I remember thinking, ooh, wouldn't this be fantastic if I came up with a story or a storyline with different characters, and these different characters had different problems, and then we could delve into the characters' families and things like that to address certain issues that these adolescents were going through. And that is how The Shrink is actually conceptualized, because the story is about this lady called Ebo, who is Motswana, and then her mom gets married to, a person in the UK or a person of UK descent. But eventually when she finishes university and everything, she comes back to Botswana, and then she's hired by Mokwana High as the school counselor. And then she addresses different topics or different things that the youth in her school go through. Things like drug abuse, rape, I can't say the word. Dyslexia, yes, that's it. And things like that. So she goes through that kind of process, as well as, living her life as well. So yeah, that's how that was the idea. The idea was that it was supposed to be a comic, not a book. But I think my mistake was assuming that this big, great idea that would solve so many problems, a lot of organizations would then rally up behind me and buy into the concept. But then one day, as I was, in Gaborone, the capital city of Botswana, knocking on doors, asking for sponsorship and things like that, somebody advised me, you know what, why don't you write a book, so that when you're actually knocking at these doors, people can see something tangible and can say, oh, okay, we'll buy into your idea. And that's how Brigitta Zwani was born. You feel the journey. I stumbled across an article actually when I was working in Gaborone. I got a full-time job at that time. And when I was working there, actually, part of my job was to go through newspapers every single morning and do a media report for some of the clients that we had. So then I stumbled across an article about, a tourist. His name was Nick Green. And at the time he was based in Maung. And he had written a book, Warriors, which was a combination of short stories and poems. The book then motivated me to actually pursue the idea of writing a book, because this person that had advised me, oh, why don't you write a book? I was like, I'm just so used to writing poetry and short stories. I don't think I can actually write a book. And I feared, not being good enough or being criticized, this, that, and the other. So after reading this book by Nick Green, I contacted him. I actually bought the book. Then we had a chat. And after reading the book, that's when I actually got the confidence of, oh, maybe I can do this. Maybe I can actually pursue a writing career. And at the time, I was actually I was freelancing for a local magazine called La Polora. So I think that also kind of built my confidence a bit. But I think with writing a book and self-publishing, you kind of, because you're going into uncharted waters, you've never done this before, you assume a lot of things and you presume a lot of things. And I think that's where my blunders were. So when I was writing my novel, I didn't know that self-publishing would be such a ginormous task. And I was convinced, well, I also didn't have the tools that would actually assist me in getting published. So it was a lot of research that needed to be done and a lot of mistakes here, there, and everywhere. For one, I didn't have the money to publish. And then I decided, you know what, I'm just going to fumble through it and I'll do pre-orders. So that's how I started. I started by doing pre-orders. And then my assumption, yet again a blunder, is that, oh yeah, the pre-orders will cover, you know, the book cover cost, the editing cost, the printing costs. And then there are other costs here, there, and everywhere that you just don't realize that are there because you're just looking at these major costs and then you don't look at like the little other costs that actually add up and then become quite a big thing. So I think, yeah, my mistakes, the mistake of the shrink, actually, the mistakes that I made on the shrink kind of like trickled into hope and have trickled as well into the sign. It's like I've got selective amnesia. Well, when I say selective amnesia, I'll tell you, I'll go through each book. So The Shrink was actually pegged to be launched December of 2017. People had pre-ordered. I was actually working in a school, which is very ironic because the book is based on like a school setting. And what's funny is that before I even started working at that school, the book had been done. It was complete. I just was fearful of publishing, and also because I didn't have the know-how of what am I supposed to do after finishing the manuscripts. What's the next step, you know? So yeah, the school that I was working at, I had quite a lot of support because a lot of them actually pre-ordered, as well as parents, you know, a lot of support from there. And then come launch date December, the books haven't arrived. Why? Because I didn't take into consideration printing costs. Yeah, the pre-orders that I had done were enough, yes, to cover like the book cover cost as well as the editing cost, and like, you know, hidden expenses that you don't even notice, like advertising. Oh yeah, let me just boost. Yeah, let me just boost. Let me just boost. Yeah, you boost, and then at the end of the month, you're like, what did I do? So yeah, things like that kind of like set me back a bit. And then eventually the book was launched March 2018, which was a lovely success. I remember I had nothing, literally I had nothing. I had no concept whatsoever. But a colleague of mine was like, I'll help you, we'll do this, we'll do that, we'll do that. And like I said, the school where I was working, they kind of rallied behind me and they assisted with the gazebos, with the decor, and this, that, and the other. So one drama that I will share is when the books arrived. So I'm all excited. The books have arrived. The truck is outside. I'm in my office, and the guard comes in, and she's like, "There's a truck out there for you." And I'm like, "Oh, okay." I'm like, "Yay, the books are here." So the truck driver comes out of the truck, and he hands me, a piece of paper, and I'm like, "What is this?" He's like, "Yeah, the books are they're in the truck, but pay up." The customs charge. So when the books actually, it's actually funny, when the books, because they were printed in South Africa, so they're coming into Botswana. And as they're coming into Botswana, you get charged by the URS, yeah? So I did not know. And it was like 1,000 pula, 1,000 plus pula, and like I'm tapped out. I have no money whatsoever. And these people want me to pay customs. And I'm like, what am I supposed to be doing? So wide-eyed, I walk into my boss's office and I hand her the piece of paper. I'm like, the books are here. But there's just one little problem. And she helped. She's like, you've been through this whole journey. Let's help you. And she paid for customs, and that's how I eventually got the shrink. With hope. The delay was even worse. The books were slated for December, again, December 2020. But I was only able to launch June of 2021. Can you imagine, from December till June? And excuse me, this time I did the same thing as I did with the shrink. I did pre-orders, and the pre-orders this time were actually way more than with the shrink. I think people had read the shrink, and there had been a little bit of publicity about the shrink. And so when I said, oh, I'm launching my next book, people kind of rallied up and they were like, we want your copy, we want your copy. Yeah. So the drama around hope, I'll tell you now, it's a little thing called editing. Why I decided to ditch the lady that helped me edit the shrink, only goodness knows. But I decided, let's try somebody else. There was this lady that had edited another book under my company. And at the time, because I was working full time, I didn't have time to kind of like go through everything that she had done. I literally did not have time. So I was like, okay, you're the editor, please just, go through everything. She was paid, everything was smooth. Then we sent everything to the author. And the author's like, yeah, everything's great. Send it to print. I was like, okay. So we send it to print. Mind you, I haven't read it. I haven't read this book. So come December, it's a holiday, and I just retired. And I was like, let me just pick up this book that we've done under my company, the first book, because before I was just a guinea pig using my own company and to publish The Shrink. Then another author said, oh yeah, I love what you've done with The Shrink. Can you please do the same with my book? And that's how I ended up with this client. And so I'm on holiday. We go up to Kasane, which is on the tip of Zambia, Namibia, and Zimbabwe. So if you're in Kasane, you're able to either nip to Namibia, nip to Zambia and see the falls, or nip to Zimbabwe as well. It's a nice little tourist town. So I'm there and I decide, let me just relax and just, go through this book. From page 1, there were mistakes galore. And I'm like, what? And I am giving my book hope to this lady to edit. And you get like silly mistakes and silly errors. And I'm like, you're not serious. And mind you, I had already paid her like half the deposit. And I'm like, I've just lost a lot of money. And now her editing is not even up to par. So then I pull my book from her and I'm like, no, this is not going to happen. Anyway, come next year, I think around February, I had a deadline on Amazon. Like Amazon, you can put your book up, or you can put the book cover up and then say that your book is on pre-order and that it will be released on such and such a date. So I had, I think February 28th or something like that as the date that Hope was supposed to be launched on Amazon. And if I missed that date, I was going to be blacklisted. So again, I'm like, what am I going to do? And this time, like, I buckled and I was like crying all day. But then eventually I was like, you know what, you need to get up. Who else is going to do this unless you get up and do it? So I got up and started fighting, and eventually I was able to find this lady. Her name is Ms. Olivia Unopatentoy. She's a senior lecturer at Booth University under the Faculty of Hospitality and Sustainable Tourism. And she's like, yeah, bring your book over here, bring your manuscript, I can do it for you. And I'm like, I only have a month. You need to edit it in a month. And she's like, yeah, no problem. Mind you, she works full time. She's a mom, a single mom. She works full time and she's got A, B, C, and D projects going on. And she's like, yeah, I'll edit for you. And she did a good job. And then there was another lady as well who also did some fact checking for me. And she was like the beta reader. Her name is Paige Adair. So those two like rescued me. They helped me big time with this book. So then eventually the book came out. But there was another little blunder. Pre-orders, they don't cover all the costs. So I was forced to sell something of value so that I was able to print the books so that the books can arrive and so that people who have pre-ordered their books can get their books. Kasani. This is my third book. Again, amnesia. It was slated for December. I don't know what it is about December. Clearly, I love December, but December Wankana, it's like confusing. It's like, no. I do not want you, Bridget. So I'm like, yeah, the book is going to come out in December. Pre-orders. Here we go again with the pre-orders. And what I do like book coupons so that I keep track of who has ordered, where they're located, their, all their details so that I don't miss anybody. So December comes and goes. It was supposed to be launched December 2021. We are in May. The books have not arrived. And I had presumptuously pegged for the launch date to be on the 16th of April. That crumbled, it failed, we're in May. Yeah. So the drama around Kasani is actually a beautiful book. And what's nice is that this time around when I was writing it, I had like a specific target audience. And what's beautiful as well is that certain people were also like buying into the concept of Kasani. So I've got a lot of people writing on Kasani at the moment. The one problem, yet again, pre-orders do not cover all the costs of publishing a book. Why do I keep forgetting this? Only goodness knows. So yeah, what's nice is that I've got people now rallying around me, but the books are not here. It's like people are like, so where are the books? You said they would be here on such and such a date, and I'm like, yeah, they were supposed to arrive on this date, but yeah, again, assumptions and presumptions. So there's an organization, Botswana Tourism, that are actually sponsoring the launch of the book, which is brilliant. I'm forever grateful. Yeah. Blunder, do not what is the saying? Do not overpromise and then underachieve, because you lose credibility. And with all three books, actually, what I am super grateful for is that in as much as I've fumbled through self-publishing so many times, and I have selective amnesia, but I'm learning as I go. I'm learning as I go. Yeah. Yeah, as mentioned, like I'm learning as I go. So for one, I've noticed that with every book, I've actually failed somehow, or I fumbled somehow, or I didn't think of this, or I didn't think, because I'm a one-woman machine, it's like I have to think of everything from the conception of the book itself or the story to writing it, to making sure that even after the person has edited, I have to reread it. And then I didn't know that there was such thing as a beta reader. I only found out recently you have to get a beta reader or several beta readers, people that would read your book before it actually goes to print, because your editor's not going to catch every single mistake. And then a beta reader, when they come and look at it with a fresh set of eyes. And then they tell you, oh, fix this or fix that, or, that kind of thing. So beta readers is something that I've learned I need every time I write a book. What else I've learned through is that I shouldn't overpromise and then underdeliver. In as much as I think I am very optimistic. Like I believe when I set my mind on something, I believe it will happen. I don't think about all the hiccups that could occur. So if I say we're going out, we're going hunting, we're gonna find a unicorn, people around me are like, a unicorn doesn't exist, Bridget. And in my head, I'm like, it does exist. Then I charge out and I look for this unicorn and realize that the unicorn doesn't exist. So in as much as I'm a go-getter and in as much as I'm very optimistic, there's also some form of reality. I need to kind of like backtrack a bit and kind of sit down, as well as share my ideas or chat with people, or because with writing, when I first started writing, I just wrote, you just write your story, you just write. But I've noticed that in as much as I just write, I also need to have other people's opinions in my story, and for it to become even more realistic. With Kasani, that's the book that I actually realized how getting an expert to read your book before you finalize it all and you're like, this is my baby. Give it to somebody that has the expertise in medicine or tourism or law, things like that. If you do that, then your book then becomes more meaty, or it holds more value and it becomes more realistic, and then it has more meaning. Even though it's fiction, it becomes brilliant if you get what I'm saying. And then another lesson that I've learned is that I shouldn't be too hard on myself. First of all, self-publishing, I knew nothing about self-publishing when I first started, and look where I am now. So I know that I will make mistakes and I will fail. All I can do is not to be too critical on myself, but also not to be too lenient. I need to find a nice balance with that as well. There were times where I was like, you know what, this is not for me, I'm going to stop writing. And then immediately when I say that, let's say a month later, I'll wake up and there's a story in my head and I need to sit down and just start writing it. So I've also learned that writing is actually in my blood. I enjoy writing and I will continue writing stories. I just need either to get my ducks in a row properly, or get ducks that know how to put themselves in a row, if that makes sense. Get people who know more about distribution. Like I'm struggling with distribution right now. Get a person that knows how to do marketing more. I'm like literally, I'm very bad at marketing. Like all I do is I knock at a person's door and I'm like, buy my book, buy my book, buy my book. So I'm that type of person. Whereas there are different ways of saying buy my book without literally saying buy my book. So yeah, if I can find ducks that actually can put themselves in a row, that would be fantastic. So yeah. Last words would be, I would love to thank the people that have read my books and that have encouraged me to continue writing. And even though I've fumbled and stumbled and, made big blunders and all that stuff, they still believe in me. They still want to pre-order. They still want to read my books. To them, all the fumbling and all that is immaterial. They just want the book. They just want the book. And then I have people that pre-order and then they just keep quiet. Like they just keep quiet. A year later, they're just quiet. And they it's like they trust me and they trust that the books will arrive. And I value that so much because being a one-woman show, it's exhausting. I get days or weeks where I just need to take a step back and just go into the bundus or something, because it's exhausting. And then what I've also learned is that I will stumble, and the way that I have stumbled, in as much as you do learn and what you've been through becomes like a stepping stone so that you improve. I mean, I've learned that I have improved in that, yes, I do pre-orders, but this time I'm determined to get sponsors. Pre-orders will not even cover, you think it'll cover from the book cover right up to printing the books. That's not the end. Then there's actually marketing the books, launching the books, and going to all these different locations. You need accommodation, you need food, you need transport, all these logistics. Pre-orders are not going to cover all that. So what I've learned is that in as much as, yes, I'm self-publishing and I don't have enough funds to, I don't have those legs, those financial legs that will get me to where I need to be. So through the journey that I've been through, I've really learned that getting a sponsor is something very important. And I'm, like I mentioned before, I'm very grateful that Blunder Tourism is on board with sponsoring me for the Kasani book launch. There's a saying, or not a saying, a quote by Thomas Edison. He said, he hasn't failed. He just said, I just found, 1,000,001 ways not to do this. And I know that it won't work, So it's the same with self-publishing. It's not like you failed, you've just learned an easier way of achieving a certain thing. And if you don't make those mistakes, how are you supposed to learn? How are you supposed to grow? So those blunders that I've been through have helped me to be on the biggest blunder. So if I didn't have blunders, I wouldn't be here. And then another lesson that I've learned is that getting published is not the end of the story. Actually, it's the beginning. In as much as Exclusive Books has said, you can have your books in all of our stores. I don't have the books to put them in one of the stores. So, you get the books published and then they can either sit in your home in these boxes, or you find a way of moving them and putting them into these stores. So that's another thing that I need to, do. So another last word is thank you for having me here and for helping me reflect on what my blunders have been and what I've learned. Because you don't like sit down and say, oh, what are my blunders? What have I learned from this? No, unless somebody says, look, sit down, self-analyze. Yeah. So I've never done that with the shrink, with Hope. It's only now when the biggest blunder has actually come to me and I'm like, I need to do A, B, C, and D. Let's do A, B, C, and D better. All this kind of stuff. So yeah, I'm very grateful that you invited me tonight.